The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising, and have come to do him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it has been written through the prophet, And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler, who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly, and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word, that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out. And behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. Friends, brothers, and sisters, the Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
My dear members of the Bethesda Springs of Hope Healing Ministry and the Feast Light Fora, Tagaytay, my dear brothers and sisters, today we celebrate the solemnity of the Epiphany of the Lord, how he revealed himself to the non-Jews, to the Gentiles. Traditionally, we call this day the Feast of the Three Kings. But our liturgy tells us that the more appropriate way of calling this solemnity is that of how the Lord reveals himself to the non-Jews, and therefore it is called Epiphany. Epiphany comes from the Greek word epiphaneo, which means to unveil oneself, to reveal oneself. And here comes the Lord revealing himself to the non-Jews, not just to the people of Israel, but also to the non-Jews. And this is very important for us because this is a source of comfort and a source of joy for us that we are included in this concept of salvation, in this event called salvation. Our gospel for today presents to us the journey of the three Magi. And in that journey, they were guided by a star. They were looking for the newborn king, the newborn king of the Jews. They were looking for Jesus. Coming from different nations, they were looking for Jesus. They represent the human heart in search of God. On our part, there are many times that we are hungry for the sacred. There are many times that we want to get close to the sacred. We want to touch the sacred. We want to go to church. We want to feel the sacred presence of God. We are just like the three magi in search of the sacred, in search of God. And yet, sometimes in our journey, we make some kind of stopover. Sometimes we pause, sometimes we stop, and sometimes we are led in the wrong direction. Just imagine their search for Jesus led them to Herod, the insecure king. And he was deeply troubled at the thought of having a newborn king. And not just Herod, but all his sycophants and all the people around him. And our gospel puts it very, very dramatically, and all Jerusalem with him. He was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Why were they troubled? Maybe they were troubled because if King Herod would no longer be king, then if you are the servant of the king, then you will lose your job. You will lose the benefits of your position. And that is why there are many people who do not want that their leader, that their king, that their president will lose his or her authority or power simply because they want that their benefits would continue. They don't want that their influence, their sphere of influence, their sense of power and authority will be lost. And that is why the expression here in the Bible is, when King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, all the people around him. The three magi were looking for the true king. But because they were looking for the true king, first they were given the image of the false king. King Herod was a false king. The true king nourishes his kingdom. The false king wants to be nourished by his servants. The true king wants to serve the kingdom. The false king wants to be served by his servants. The true king wants to give up his life in defense of the kingdom. But the false king wants to kill other people in defense of his own self. The false king is insecure, and insecurity can kill. Friends, brothers, and sisters, it was one master stroke on the part of God that before giving the Magi the image of the true king, they would have to see for themselves what it is to be a false king. Finally, they found the star all over again. And the star somehow stopped over the place where Jesus was. And then they started prostrating themselves, worshiping the true king. And then they opened their gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And these are very symbolic. Gold means kingship, royalty, majesty. Frankincense has to do with the priesthood of Christ. And myrrh is to be used at the burial of Christ. Why? Because prophets are meant to be killed. Prophets will be killed. And therefore you have here the threefold office of Jesus being revealed by the Magi themselves. When they opened their gifts, they were actually telling the Lord, this is the king, the priest, and the prophet that we are looking for. The king who wants to serve, the priest who prays for us, intercedes for us before the Father, and the prophet who will be killed someday on the cross. And that is why the Magi, when they opened their gifts, Jesus was revealed. But on the other hand, aside from the searching and the finding and the worship and the revealing of their gifts, on the other hand, it was really Jesus who wanted to reveal himself to them. And Jesus wanted to reveal to these three Magi, Jesus wanted to reveal himself to them in far different ways. Because Jesus wanted them to see for themselves that the newborn king, God himself, would be revealed in poverty. God would be revealed in poverty. Therefore, God reveals himself as a poor person. Every time we serve the poor, God unveils himself. God unfolds himself. God reveals himself to us. God reveals himself in poverty. And this is something that the Magi had to learn. Maybe consciously or unconsciously on their part, they thought that this newborn king, priest, and prophet would be revealed in a big mansion, in a big kingdom, in a big house. But lo and behold, they were able to see Jesus in his poverty. Because God reveals himself to us in poverty. Not the kind of poverty that is the work of injustice. Not the kind of poverty that is the work of violence. Not the kind of poverty that is the work of greed. But the kind of poverty that simplifies one's own needs, desires, or wants. The moment we simplify our lifestyle, then we will be able to see the face of Jesus in the poor. People who want to complicate their lifestyle would never be able to see the face of Christ. And they only see in the poor the faces of drug addicts, the faces of criminals, thieves. They will never be able to see the face of Christ because they do not want to simplify their life. The way to seeing the face of Jesus in the poor is always by way of solidarity, by way of communion with our brothers and sisters who are poor. We need to acknowledge the fact that even if we live in positions of privilege, power, and authority, we need to simplify our lives. The moment we complicate our lives, thinking that we are already so luxurious, we are already so powerful and so wealthy, then we will forget the face of Christ in the poor. And we will look at the poor simply as threats to our comfort, threats to our luxury. God reveals himself to us in poverty. Another thing that the Magi learned was that God reveals Himself to us in vulnerability. The infant is vulnerable. You see, in the animal kingdom, we immediately find that there are animals that when they are born, they can immediately walk. When puppies are born, or when piglets are born, or when a small cow is born, when the calf is born, then the newborn calf, the newborn piglet, the newborn dog or puppy immediately walks. But the infant is very vulnerable. The infant has to be taught everything. The infant has to be cared for, has to be nourished. Friends, brothers, and sisters, unless we open ourselves, unless we open our vulnerability to others, we will never see the face of Christ. And the people will never see the face of Christ in us if we simply project to them, if we simply present to them all our power, all our leadership and authority. But the moment we realize that even those people who are up there are vulnerable, then people will help them. Then people will see their humility. God reveals Himself among the humble. Friends, brothers, and sisters, in our vulnerability, humility is just well within our reach. But in our strength, pride is there to tell us we can do it, to tell us we don't even need a God, to tell us we can be our own man, we can be our own self, and we don't need people around us. Why? Because we are independent, autonomous, powerful. Because we are wealthy, we also become arrogant. Because we are powerful, we also become arrogant. But the moment we realize our vulnerability, especially the vulnerability of an infant, we are God's children. We are not called adults. We are called God's children. It's almost like saying we are called God's infants. And therefore we express our dependence on God. And such sense of dependence leads us to prayer. It leads us to worship. It leads us to adoration. Friends, brothers, and sisters, God reveals Himself in poverty. God reveals Himself in vulnerability. And God reveals Himself in prayer. The moment we pray, we are simply opening up ourselves to God, and God revealing Himself to us. Friends, brothers, and sisters, what do we reveal to others? Do we reveal our arrogance, our pride, our achievement, our success, our honors, our intelligence, our brilliance, our expertise? When will we ever start revealing the face of Christ? And the moment we reach out to the poor and the vulnerable, then we will realize also that Christ slowly reveals His face to us. Then we will worship Christ, then we will express our dependence on Christ because we are not kings in our own right. Only one is the true King, Jesus Christ. The rest are false kings, the rest are pretenders to power.